In this video, I am going to provide you with a few ideas and assembly methods on how you can build a porch that might have this design. Now, this is not going to work for all front porches, and I also will not be able to provide you with structural engineering information like lumber sizes or footing sizes, because this varies from area to area. However, I will be able to provide you with a few things that you might not have thought about, and something that will work better for your project than the design that you have right now. So let's go ahead and take this porch apart. And the reason why I do that, for those of you who are new to the channel, because I think it helps viewers get a better idea of what you're going to be doing than if I just started from scratch. So here we're going to take a tour of the framing while we're taking it apart, and then we are going to put it all back together. And here we have some lookouts that will be supporting the fascia board. Get rid of the fascia board. Get a view of the rafters along with the blocking. And then let's go ahead and remove the rafters to where we have the ceiling joist. And I will be using pressure blocks instead of joist hangers. However, you can use joist hangers. And we will be shaping the tops of the blocks so that we can get a better roof sheathing connection. And I will be extending the ceiling joist so that I can connect them to the roof truss to provide us with a nice structural connection between the porch and the existing house, or the house framing, depending upon whether or not you're building this porch afterwards or during new construction. And the blocks will be going over the joist. However, this might not be the case if you use larger joists like 2x6. And something like this is very important to a project like this. And even if you don't understand 100% of the reasons why I'm doing this, I would seriously consider doing it if you can on your project. And the beam is extending past a little bit, and the end of the beam here will line up with the inside of the fascia board, because we will be nailing the fascia board to the beam when we get around to that. Next up, let's remove the ceiling joist and then take a look at the beams and the post. Get rid of that. Take a look at the slab and the post base connectors. Next up, let's go ahead and remove the concrete. Take a look at the rebar and how the post base connectors will be centered in the footing, if at all possible. And I do understand that's not always easy. And we are going to be using dowels. And if you're adding the porch after you've built the existing house, then you might need a tool that will drill holes into the concrete footing so that you can epoxy and firmly anchor the dowels into the concrete. And the spacing that we're using for our rebar will be 24 inches on center and then 18 inches on center going this way. And we will try to position the rebar in the center of the slab. And our slab in this example is going to be 6 inches thick. A view of it from above. And without forming anything, let's go ahead and pour the slab to give you an idea of what it looks like from above, along with the post base connectors. Next up, let's go ahead and put the post in, and then take a look at the top connector. And most of this hardware can be found at your local lumber yards or home improvement centers. And of course, we have the center of the beams breaking over the post, over the center of the post. And it's usually a general rule of thumb that a beam needs to sit on top of a post a minimum of 1.5 inches. However, you would need to check with your local building authorities to verify that. And then here we have a view of how the backing might need to be trimmed around the ceiling joist, or you might want to stop this ceiling joist right here, depending upon how much work that's going to be. And on this side of the building here, I position the lookout to where it would break between the two pieces of fascia board so that I could get nailing from each piece into the lookout. And I didn't do that on the other side. I did something a little different, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. And of course, all of our ceiling joist lapping. And then this will give you an idea of how you can nail it into the pressure blocks. You can end nail the pressure blocks into the beam, and then end nail the ceiling joist into the block, or toe nail it into the beam, or do both, toe nail it and end nail it. And I would imagine 2 toenails and 1 end nail would probably be sufficient. Next up, let's go ahead and install our shaped blocks. And this should give you a pretty good idea how this part is assembled and connected to the building. The next step, if you are building the porch with the house, will be to install the roof sheathing. If you are building the porch after the home is built, then you might want to install a ledger and joist hangers. And I'm pretty sure I have other examples of that at our website in the porch building or framing section. And then even though I didn't notch it on this end, I wanted to provide you with 2 different examples for the lookouts, but this is probably going to work better than this side here because it's going to provide you with additional support. And for this type of construction, I would recommend using a board that will attach to the roof and that the roof rafters can sit on, instead of just sitting the roof rafters on top of the roof sheathing, unless the roof rafters will be sitting on top of a truss or a roof rafter. And I would also like to throw in that I've never done a project with an engineer involved in it to where we didn't have this sleeper board here. So keep that in mind also when you're working on your project or designing it. And a view of how the rafter is going to have a seat cut or a little notch in it to sit over the beam, along with the blocking here. Take a look at the other side. And of course, I did this different on both sides also. I had this board here, the one on this side, run past and tie into the truss here. And then this one here just simply nails to that board. And then I put a few support studs in so that you could install your siding, stucco, or whatever you're going to finish the wall off with. And this will provide you with a nice even transition between the gable end wall and the end of the porch. Next up, let's take a look at a view from the other side there. And then let's go ahead and install our fascia board. And here we can see how everything connects together. And this piece will be attaching to the beam or the top section of the beam and to the block here. However, we will not have any lookouts here, so the span of this fascia board from here to here won't have any intermediate supports like we will on the other side. And if at all possible, this is going to provide you with a little more structural support. And of course, another reason why you might want to position the lookout block here, if you can, would be so that you could break the plywood half on the block. And that might look a little better than doing it this way, to where we didn't position the lookout over here. And it might not look as nice from the bottom. And instead of framing this side with 2x, like we did on the other side, I simply cut some plywood. You can cut a couple of pieces of 3/4 inch plywood, or something that would equal 1.5 inches in thickness. And in my opinion, something like this is going to be a little stronger than what we did on the other side, even though I don't have any structural calculations to support that claim. And you can see here where the lookout is positioned in a different spot than on the other side. Next up, let's go ahead and install our roof sheathing, and this will give you an idea of what I'm talking about, where we have a gap that might be a little more visible from the bottom, or something that you could always install some trim underneath, along with the flat framing anchor we're using to make this connection between the fascia board a little stronger. And I used a different type of hardware on the other side. And I also want to provide you with another view here of why this extends past and won't be sitting on top of the sheathing for the existing house. And that will happen on both ends. And then what I did here with the sheathing was started with a 4-foot sheet and then cut this one a little shorter so that it would break over the center of the row of blocks we put here underneath the sheathing, and then put a smaller strip here so that I could get a nice connection through here. However, most structural engineers have a minimum size for roof sheathing that you might want to pay attention to or ask them about before doing something like this. Another view of the porch fascia board and how it connects to the gable end fascia board here. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at the mending plate that I used here. And you could always use a strap there if you wanted to, a long strap, or a different type of building hardware. And you can see here where the position of the lookout is hiding the seam or the break between the roof sheathing. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at the ceiling and how it all blends in here. Now I want to point out with this design, I went ahead and raised the porch beam to create a flat ceiling all the way to the front. And this isn't a standard method of construction. Most of the time we have the ceiling joist sitting on top of the beam, and the beam would be a little bit lower. So again, another design in the video that I wanted to point out to provide you with another option for your project. And the last thing I want to point out in the video before it ends is the fact that you might need to ventilate this area, which might require some holes in the blocks here to allow air to flow in from the front. And then you might need to install some holes in the roof sheathing to allow the air to circulate in between the porch and the house. However, it would be difficult for me to tell you how many of these holes you would need to install, because that will depend upon the project and the volume of air required for the ventilation for this particular building. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment area. Or if you enjoyed the video, let us know. And don't forget to hit the thumbs up button whether you enjoyed the video or not.